Welcome to Divisionalysis, I'm Fog. Today is a follow-up video to the Coyote's Mask Part 2. I'm going to clarify some points and then provide two optimal setups for the St Elmos engine and the Chameleon. Let's go. Now, if you haven't seen a lot from my channel, a little while ago I ran every single mission 3 times over to gather some statistics in order to inform me better when I was conducting calculations. As part of that, what I did is I gathered information on engagement radians, how far away each of my engagements was, how far the target was away when I engaged it. I compiled all of those results across all of those missions and was surprised when I came out with a very distinct trend. At the time, this is what I said. Other than those two, there is a very clear, distinct pattern that has emerged, and quite literally what each of the levels is most likely designed on. Now, in more recent times, another content creator has taken offense to what I've said there, basing their opinion on the fact that it was my personal gameplay and therefore had no relevance, and that the data was completely useless. Here's what they had to say about my trend.
A little bit bluntly, to make the statement that these missions are designed to be these ranges, and that this chart is the definitive ranges compiled for inside of missions, is to use my 1 PG-13 F-bomb is fucking stupid.
Now, when I look back on what I said at the time, I definitely don't say to myself,
I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that.
When I reflect on it, what would have been a much better approach for any hecklers would have been,
no shit, Sherlock.
And that's because it's not likely that that's how the game is designed. That is exactly how the game is designed. When you go into it and you analyze and have a look at where cover is placed, where the enemies are spaced, and you analyze over and over and over again every single room in every single mission is designed in exactly the same way. And not only that, the enemies have specific ranges that their AI is programmed to be at. When you think about it, you instantly recognize in your mind that rushes are going to be all up in your face, and they're going to try to close the distance as much as possible. You'll then have assault guys behind that, you'll have engineers, and you'll have radio controllers and drone chicks behind that, and at the very back you'll have snipers, and you'll have the rocket grenade enemies as well. And so much are they programmed to stay at these engagement distances that even when you try to close the distance, we've all been in that Benny Hill show race with the sniper at the back of the room, where you try to close the distance, they break cover and they move back trying to re-establish whatever the AI is telling them is their most appropriate engagement distance. So, to that content creator who took great offense about me making generalizations based on this trend, I respectfully disagree. I'm actually more embarrassed to say that I was surprised by the result. And in regards to the methodology used to try and invalidate my data, well, there's a couple of things that you should probably know about statistics. First of all, this is the data point that the other content creator chose as a way of invalidating my data. So the first thing you should know about statistics is that if you take an outlier from an established trend, which is what I was trying to get to, any statistician will tell you that when you normalize an outlier, you strengthen the trend. You don't invalidate it. The fact that you chose this one outlier, even though I stated very deliberately that it was an outlier, annoys me, but let's put that aside. The second methodology that they used is they use Ranger to gather their engagement distance statistics. Something that clearly a lot of people are unaware of is that Ranger is reading incorrectly when it comes to its range. Now, I say this because I deliberately collected the engagement range distance so that I had the baseline statistics to better inform optimal setups for Coyote's masks, specifically Coyote's masks. And what you're seeing now is just me showing the Coyote's mask displaying its 3 various buff icons. One for close, one for far, and one for in the middle. And here is some footage where what you can see is that Ranger is showing 14 meters to these targets. So therefore, every engagement with these targets should be the short range buff. But what I can show you quite clearly is that the mid-range buff for Coyotes, it never wavers. None of these targets, according to Coyote's mask, are inside 15 meters. So this content creator also threw shade at the fact that I had used what he considered to be massively overgeneralized and useless statistics in regards to engagement ranges, and how I'd applied those to Coyote's mask, and how when he showed his results different to my outlier, that surely it showed that it was completely pointless to do an optimal setup because it depends on your game style, on your gameplay. Well, once again, understanding a little bit about statistics helps, because if you understand a bell curve, you understand that 68% of all of your data points are actually at the peak of the bell, or around the peak of the bell. So analyzing an outlier on the very edges of the bell makes fuck all difference. You could add all of the stats that you came up with to that outlier, and it is going to shift that curve very, very little, if at all. And what I knew when I gave my optimal setups for Coyotes is that it is very, very hard to shift 68% of the data points to the left to make a difference. I then also factored not only the difficulty in doing that, but how far you would actually have to move that bell in order to make a difference to the optimal setups that I was recommending. So let's start with the results that I got when I was playing these missions. I was using a 6 red core build, so I was spongy, and so maybe wasn't as aggressive as I normally would. Well, actually, I was certainly nowhere near as aggressive as what I would be with any one of my normal builds, because I don't run 6 red builds. But so I was a little bit less aggressive. So these are the statistics that I came up with, and the optimal build for a gear, or an optimal setup for a gear set build, so let's say strikers, for my style of gameplay was this. And I knew how difficult it was to move that bell, and I knew how difficult it was to make any difference to the recommendation. So in the next video, I just made it easy on myself, and I just used a third for every single engagement distance. And of course, the result for the optimal setup didn't change. I can even shift the bell to be 40% of your engagements inside 15 meters, 40% 15 to 25, and then only having 20% outside 25 meters. That's actually incredibly hard to do. For all missions, that is. Because you can't just close the distance with someone that's outside 25 meters. You have to go through the enemies that are already at 10 to 15 and 15 to 25 before you can get to those other enemies. And sometimes you will have to engage them. There is no choice. Sometimes the game restricts you from being able to even access those enemies from inside shorter ranges. Sometimes the game will nail you down to one position, either by fire or by an actual mechanic setup, and so you are forced to engage outside that distance. But even at 40-40-20, it's still the optimal setup. And what I did for the content creator that said that my statistics and my recommendations have no relevance whatsoever, I actually analysed the data that they collected and came up with their statistics and adjusted for the Ranger inaccuracy accordingly. And the results for that person, who is quite aggressive, plays a credible amount of the game. Obviously, they're a content creator, so it makes sense. And their statistics were less than 40-40-20, so again, the recommendation stands. And even if I hadn't adjusted for the Ranger inaccuracy, that person's statistics were this, and once again, my recommendation for the optimal setup for Coyotes remains the same. So when someone says that I can't make these generalizations and can't recommend an optimal build because of varying playstyles, well, respectfully, I disagree. Now, the reason why people have gotten away with recommending other setups, or why potentially you yourself have run around with a different setup to this the entire time that you've played this game, is because these small differences really mean sweet fuck all. That's the truth. The natural variance in the number of crits versus non-crits actually provides an order of magnitude larger amount of variance than what the difference between the worst setup for Coyotes and the best setup is. That's how little it actually makes a difference. Having said that, I know you're a nerd if you're still watching and you actually care about those fractions. So in the last video, I gave you the 47-153 recommendation for a 4-slot assault rifle, but I wanted to give you recommendations for both the St Elmos and the Chameleon, because both of those weapons have a variation in the amount of crit chance that they've got to a 4-slot weapon. With the St Elmos, you've got a 20% crit chance mod and 20% crit damage, and for the Chameleon you have a 15% crit chance mod, but you have a crit chance attribute, meaning that for both of these weapons, the options that you have in regards to your setups is actually more limited. So if you're setting up with Grupo, you have the options of a 42-188, 48-176, 54-164, or bang on 60-152. And I've put in a Seska Grupo, so essentially not taking Coyote's mask at all, and you can have a 58-176 as the best option for that combo. And the results are this, which means that the optimal setup for a Grupo St Elmo's striker build is 48-176, producing 103.32 average crit damage. Then we go to Seska options, and this significantly limits the number of options that we've got. You actually only have two. It's either 52-173 or 58-161. And Seska Grupo stays the same, and the results are a win for Seska on a Strikers St Elmo's build, with an optimal setup being 52-173. That is your best option, And what you'll see is whether you're using Grupo or whether you're using the absolute best with Seska, you are actually only barely better than not using the Coyote's mask at all. Moving on to the Chameleon. This one's for you, Audio Fraternity. It's not the build you wanted, but I hope this helps out. So for the Grupo Chameleon options, we have 46.5, 168, 52.5, 156, 58.5, 144. And then I put down the Seska Grupo option as well. And the results for the Grupo scenario is that the optimal setup is 46.5, 168. Let's go to the Seska options, and there is in fact only one. We now have such a high amount of crit chance that there is no room for maneuver, and the only option is 56.5, 153, and that gives us a result of 96.72 average crit damage, and that means that for the Chameleon, the optimal setup is a Grupo. Now in both cases, the St Elmos and also the Chameleon, what that looks like on a build is that every single piece of your gear and every single mod has to be set to crit damage. Especially true in the case of the Chameleon when you consider that one of its buffs also includes crit chance and crit damage. But what you're saying to yourself is probably, well, I don't run my build like that. I run it with Obliterate on the chest piece because I'm never going to exceed 100 stacks in a normal gameplay. And I would agree with you. The problem is that you now have two competing buffs. On the surface, they may appear to be synergistic, with Obliterate requiring crit chance and Coyote's mask operating off crit chance and crit damage. But what you have is Obliterate, who wants you to be at maximum crit chance all the time, and then you have Coyote's, which only wants you to be at maximum crit chance for a third of the time. And these two actually compete with each other for an optimal build setup. And now I get to show you how little difference any of these different setups actually matter. So what you have here is a graph of Striker and Obliterate stacking, which with each of the bullets that strike an enemy, from 1 across the bottom all the way through to 120 bullets. The vertical axis is the value of the damage being done in thousands. So starting at around about 270 odd K and each stack. So what you have here is that you have a slightly steeper angle as Obliterate is stacking along with Striker stacking at the same time. Obliterate maxes out at, depending on how much crit chance you have. Then you have just primarily the Striker's damage stacking all the way through to 100, where it levels out, and then you are doing maximum damage for both Obliterate and Striker stacked accordingly. This is 4 different builds and their variation in the damage that's being done. The orange line, which as you can see for the majority of the graph is the maximum performer, is the setup that I told you is the most optimal setup for Coyote's mask. That is a Seska 52-173. The grey that you see here is a Seska setup at 58-161, so as you can see, performing moderately better during the time that Obliterate is stacking. And you reach that maximum Obliterate level sooner than what you do on the 52-173 Seska. The lowest of the damage amounts during that period is the Grupo 48-176. But after that Obliterate maxes out, it then forms the second highest as far as damage being done is concerned. And then you have no Coyotes at all, so just Seska and Grupo together, and it is hidden for the most part, being almost identical to the Seska 58-161, again because it also carries 58% crit chance, and it's only after Obliterate maxes out that average damage from no Coyotes is slightly lower than what it is for the Seska 58-161. If we go back to the chart that I produced before, what you can see, the Grupo average damage 103.32 is outperforming Seska Grupo, but that difference of 10% crit chance means that the Seska Grupo option during the obliterate stacking portion will develop damage faster. And then from the Seska St Elmos options, what you can see is that the average bullet damage for a 52-173 setup is the highest. But what you can see here, the 58-161 is only marginally different to not wearing Coyote's mask at all. And that's the difference between the grey and the blue on the graph. But what we are talking about is an absolute minuscule amount of damage. Minuscule amount of damage difference. And if you saw my previous video, regarding how much damage it actually took to make any material difference on the target, what you realise is that there is going to be virtually zero difference between any of these build setups. And that's why people have run around with all these various setups and not noticed any difference whatsoever. That's the truth. At the end of the day, the difference in solo play that Coyote's mask makes as being best in slot over just taking Grupo is sweet fuck all, and it probably never ever makes a difference to your actual time to kill at all. Coyote's mask has always been about its group benefits. The talent is called pack instincts for a reason. In solo play, makes sweet fuck all difference. Doesn't matter. Honestly, does not matter whether you run no Coyote's mask whatsoever or what your build setup is. But when it comes to group play, having one or two Coyote's masks can make a considerable difference, because now those buffs are applied across 4 people if everybody is building for those buffs. And there you have it. Just a small little addition to my 2 Coyote's masks build. The first one being high-end setups and the second one being gear set setups. Now, I don't know why my videos attract so much hate. I really don't. But I hope this provides some clarity for haters and fans alike. But if you are going to sit on the sidelines and you are going to actually call people out by name, then I think you should really understand what it is that you are saying. Definitely understand what it is that the person that you're calling out is saying, and just check your facts. If you want to have a legitimate conversation in the interest of progressing this community's knowledge, I'm all ears. If you liked and like, want to see more, subscribe. I will see you in the next one. Fog out.